Introduction to Emergent Consciousness and the Tiers of Awareness. Welcome, world. Please lie back and relax on the couch here at Beyond Psychology. My theory of emergent consciousness and the tiers of awareness is mandatory in order to understand many of my applications of psychology. I'll be referring to a certain tier of awareness or level of consciousness when we examine many concepts in future videos. So before I get to explaining the different levels of emergent consciousness, you may want to know why I've devised this theory as well as why it's important. I'm 36 years old, and I'm not sure when I first started taking an interest in studying our psychological states, but it was most certainly at a very young age, perhaps as early as 10 or 12 years old. I was raised by a psychologist and a school teacher, so I was exposed to psychology and that we could understand human behavior. As young as 5 years old, I knew something was a little bit off about the adults I observed. By the time I was 14, I was pretty sure that everyone was a little bit crazy. By the time I was 21, I was certain everyone was crazy. Around that time, I became obsessed with understanding why people did what they did. One question led to another, which led to research, and more questions and then more research. It's a vicious cycle. Do you doubt that the majority of the population is insane? Look around you. Do I really need to make a case to prove it? The question is, why is the majority insane? And why are some of us failing to understand or identify or accept this fact? I'd say there's a bit of cognitive bias. A fear-based cognitive bias. We don't want to face the facts of reality. This leads to what I call scientific aversion. It's understandable. Facing our fears is tremendously difficult. It's because of this inability to face our fears, we decided to firmly insert our heads in our asses. What I refer to as head and ass syndrome, or high ass, as in shove our heads as high up our asses as possible. I understand this kind of bias, but that doesn't mean I condone the problem. It comes back to the children running with scissors blindfolded effect. Oftentimes, people don't see the damages they're causing, and it's the innocent bystanders who are stabbed with those scissors. And I have been one of those innocent bystanders for the majority of my life. I'm fucking tired of it. What I came to realize was that the majority of psychological concepts are likely just the study of individualistic awareness. Human perceptions of reality. Human perceptions of reality are extremely flawed for many different reasons. So when psychology is applied to people with a human perception of reality, there is a certain level of accuracy. Additionally, many of the most popular psychological concepts are likely just manifestations of mass psychological defense mechanisms, or simple concepts that were easy to popularize. At any rate, certain levels of acquired knowledge combined with certain biological sensory abilities will yield a certain number of possible perceptions of reality. If we try to oversimplify reality, then we get the wrong answers. Hence, the majority are living in a false perception of reality. I will also remind people that psychology is birthed out of philosophy, and psychology fortifies the concept of individualism, which is in line with religious beliefs about the soul and with biological sensory information we receive from the parietal lobe. I'm fairly certain that the combination of cultural bias and the limitations of our neurological state have produced the framework for all perceptions, philosophies, religions, as well as psychology. All of this serves the status quo, not scientific fact. So what will we cover in the series? The different levels of consciousness are what I refer to as the tiers of awareness. The tiers range from as low as mere structural geometry on to what we call human perception, and nearing the end, just for fun, what we call alien life forms and gods. So if you can hang in there through the majority of the series, there may or may not be cake at the end. After that, I will also make an additional video that talks a bit more about tiers 4, 5, and 6 in regards to their psychological state, studying them, and treating the mental illnesses that can arise from those states. These are factors that mainstream psychology does not compensate for, as far as I know. It's likely that mainstream psychology studies what I refer to as Tier 4 and Tier 5 consciousness. Tier 4 and Tier 5 are individualists. Individualistic ideology is the product of thousands of years of religious philosophies affecting our current perception of reality. This is something I will cover in more depth in a future video. My point is that understanding the level of consciousness helps to understand psychological states. I identified this early in my studies, although I did not solidify my theory into coherent structuring until 2 or 3 years ago. Then for 2 or 3 years I practiced applying it to my understanding and psychological profiling. Just a reminder, if you haven't watched the Introduction to Beyond Psychology video, I highly recommend that you do so you know who you're listening to and perhaps have an idea of why you should be listening. Real briefly here, I just want to address transpersonal psychology. Throughout a journey of emergent consciousness, the absorption of our knowledge pool and processing of that information, I accidentally reinvented the field of transpersonal psychology without realizing that that's what I did. My methods are always based on scientific facts and what scientific facts mean. So the theory that gets produced from that removes ambiguous terminology of a spiritual variety. What I've done is given transpersonal psychology more credibility. Some of the theories of transpersonal psychology have value, and certainly I'm going to have to go through it thoroughly in order to absorb that particular knowledge pool. In the future, I will make videos addressing concepts of transpersonal psychology, as well as many other concepts of psychology. What transpersonal psychology attempted to do was merge spirituality and psychology, which is a mistake. Now, recognizing that higher consciousness exists due to a product of emergence is reasonable, and compensating with psychology for that is mandatory, obviously. But using psychology to justify people's spiritual beliefs is bullshit. I know people really enjoy spiritualism, mysticism, talk about the soul. Unfortunately, when you use that terminology, what you're actually saying is, I don't know. When you use that terminology instead of saying I don't know, then you don't have to be curious anymore. And if you take away your curiosity, then you're not going to ask questions. And if you don't ask questions, then you're not going to do any research. So basically, you'll use that terminology and it'll prevent you from having to put forth the effort and expend the calories to learn science. They've started to teach transpersonal psychology in college because this is a consumer-driven society. So they're giving you something that's labeled psychology and therefore associated with being credible. So what you end up getting is a tool to justify your spiritual bullshit. And they're more than happy to sell you that snake oil. Now, if they were to tell you the truth that your spiritualism just means that you're full of shit, then you wouldn't pay them the money. Do you not see a problem with this? I know I fucking do. Well, regardless if you see a problem with this or not, eventually you're gonna figure out that it is a problem. Or maybe it'll be 200 years before humanity finally says, okay, we can be adults and admit that we don't know something for a minute. Now, a reminder, don't shoot the messenger. It's not my fault for thinking these thoughts. I'm responsible for what I say, but not what you understand. You could either choose to accept the fact that there's a problem and try to learn from me, or you can run screaming with your ears plugged and continue to live in a delusional perception of reality. That's on you. But hey, by all means, go ahead. I'm here to tell you what is the most likely truth, not kiss your ass. I'm not playing a popularity contest, and I'm not trying to manipulate you. I say this with respect, and I remind you that I'm attempting to push the field forwards in a healthy fashion, as well as the knowledge pool of our species. The evolution of the field must be in line with the natural laws of emergence, which affect our consciousness. I set up a certain classification system that I use to separate the different tiers of awareness, and keep in mind that there are varying degrees of tiers of awareness. For example, in this series I've separated them from 0 to 8. But remember, 7 and 8 are just for fun. 0 through 6 are my actual theory. But at any rate, there's not just, say, Tier 1 and Tier 2. There's a varying degree in between, like 1.25 and 1.50 and 1.75. I don't get into that in this video. I'm trying to keep things a little bit simple to save time. Anyway, my criteria for separation of the tiers is based on a level of memory, cause and effect analysis, the ability to take advantage of that cause and effect analysis, area awareness, or mental mapping of environment, and the ability to process all of the above. Area awareness is an important factor of classification. So I visually picture how far a form of consciousness perceives its environment, kind of in a bubble. Some forms of consciousness don't perceive anything past their biology. Other forms, an entire forest. Humans, maybe a whole city. You get the point. An additional classification is the complexity level of manipulations of other matter and energy in the environment. Manifestations. Creation and invention, or perhaps enslaving an animal or other people. Scientists, doctors, and psychologists must understand that they are not the highest level of consciousness, at least not usually, given most of the time they're more aware than the majority of people that they deal with, but there are forms of consciousness that have surpassed those professionals' ability to understand. And new tools are required if they want any chance of keeping up with the emergent properties of the universe. Even if you're not a science-minded person, it's still important for you to understand that these levels of consciousness exist, and it's going to be good to know how to deal with them a little bit. So this theory is the beginning of all of our understandings in order to cope with the ever-increasing complexity of our states of existence. This is just a theory, like many concepts on this channel, just stating my intentions in advance. I also don't bother theorizing things that don't have value. If I do entertain a flimsy theory, it gets labeled as a concept and put in the Fringe Science Fun playlist. Yes, entertaining educational material. Okay, that's it for the introduction. Thanks for watching and making an effort to expand our understanding. Thanks for joining the Thought Revolution, and please remember to subscribe, thumb up, and share. Alright, see you in the next video.